Chapter 9 The Two Noisy Knights. There were two knights in Great Park who thought they were rangers. The people of the kingdom called them Sir Bumpkin and Sir Pumpkin and tried to be understanding, but knights had long ago gone out of style. Sir Bumpkin was long and thin and far-sighted. He was always tripping on roots and bushes and stones because he couldn't see the danger that was near. He was always getting stuck in tight situations because he squinted to see the danger that was far off. The two knights always attended ranger councils in the ranger lodge. At the end of each meeting, after all reports had been made and all tales had been told, the ranger commander would ask for the pledge to the king. He would shout, "How goes the world?" And all would answer back, "The world goes not well, but the kingdom comes." Each ranger, to a man and a woman, raised his hatchet and vowed, "To the kingdom and the king." Then they marched from the lodge to take up watch or to go on patrol. The two knights would shout these same cries. They would draw their swords from their scabbards. Then they would rush from the lodge with the others and lead their horses to a large stone. Bumpkin, grunting and groaning, would push the heavy Pumpkin into his saddle. Then Pumpkin, in turn, would pull the gangly Bumpkin into his. Often one would drop a sword or banner. "Yoo-hoo, yoo-hoo," they would shout. "You over there, would you mind getting my sword or banner?" If no one seemed to be around, they yelled yoo-hooed all the louder. When no one appeared, one of the knights would have to climb down and then mount all over again. By the time both knights were seated on their steeds, the rangers would all be gone. The lights in the lodge would be dark, but Pumpkin would shout anyway, "Onward, onward, under the banner of the king!" But alas, they never seemed to find the service they sought, for the danger was always over when they reached the scene. "It's the spirit that counts," Sir Bumpkin reminded Sir Pumpkin one day, when they were both feeling a little slow. So they made up a spirited song. "A ranger is a ranger is a ranger. His shout is dreadful bale. He keeps the park from strangers with his awful mighty hail." Wouldn't you know that on this very afternoon they engaged the enemy, or at least they thought it was the enemy? "Halt! Who goes there?" cried Sir Pumpkin. His weak eyes couldn't quite make out the man running hurriedly on the path, but he thought he could see clearly enough to know that the figure was carrying a weapon. "Halt?" questioned the man. "Why, it's me, the baker." The chief baker was hurrying from the kitchen with 3 loaves of hot bread, fresh from the oven, balanced on a baking paddle. The two knights thought he said, "a breaker." Breakers were the enchanter's huntsmen. Everyone in Great Park was thankful when rangers caught these spies, so the knights had visions of glory. "We'll teach you a thing or two," yelled Bumpkin, and reined his steed to one end of the path. Pumpkin clattered to the other end, then turned toward the chief baker in the middle. Both knights fixed their visors, both steadied their jousting poles, both horses pawed the ground, both breathed hot air from their nostrils. "Charge!" screamed Pumpkin. "On we go!" Both knights pointed toward the little baker, who was carefully carrying his 3 loaves on the long-handled paddle. Between the one's near sight and the other's far sight, they completely missed their opponent and neatly knocked each other out of the saddle. The chief baker was unharmed, but his fresh loaves were trampled in the dirt. "Now I'll teach you two a thing or two," he yelled in anger, and thumped and thwacked the two knights on their heads with his wooden breadboard. When he left, their armor was all dents and bashes, but Bumpkin and Pumpkin knew better than to talk about this hapless adventure. A few weeks later, on the day of appointments, when merits and ribbons were awarded to various rangers, the two knights were a little late arriving at the lodge. They had been so excited as they helped each other into their armor that their suits had become entangled. By the time they were unstuck and on their way, they arrived to find the lodge dark. They peeked in anyway. It was very quiet inside, more quiet than they had ever heard it before. Someone was sitting in the front of the lodge on the platform. It was Ranger Commander. When the two knights entered, the commander rose to his feet. "Sir Bumpkin and Sir Pumpkin, I have been waiting for you. A grievance has been filed against you by the chief baker, among others. You have been accused of masquerading as rangers. Stand forth." The two knights stepped forward. Clang, clatter, creak. Their armor rattled as they marched toward the platform. Both were wearing purple plumes in their helmets, which they had given to each other for good sportsmanship and knight-like conduct. "Have you any scars or wounds from helping others?" the ranger commander asked, very quietly. Bumpkin started to mention the time Pumpkin had been rusted shut in his suit of armor, and Bumpkin had pried him loose. But he thought better of it. The knights shook their heads no. Their helmets rattled. "Have you ever fought fire in the forest?" Though the commander was not shouting, his voice echoed in the empty hall. They shook their heads again. Sir Pumpkin lost his footing a little, tripped over his own standard, and staggered a few paces. "When have you protected Great Park from its enemies?" Sir Bumpkin stuttered, "Never, sir." He knew better than to mention their challenge of the chief baker. But as if he had read the knight's mind, the ranger commander brought up the incident himself. "You fought the chief baker, whom you mistook for a breaker, but you did so to seek glory for yourselves, not to protect Great Park. You wish to be honored as rangers, but you have not acquired the fighting skills, the equipment, the courage." Sir Pumpkin had recovered his balance. He said, "Sir, we are very good at ranger shouts. We have composed battle songs." The two knights stood straight. They threw back their heads, their plumes bobbed, and one fell out. They shouted, "Onward for the cause!" They shouted, "After we go!" They gave the ranger call, "How goes the world?" They started to sing, "A ranger is a ranger is a ranger." But Ranger Commander was so quiet, and the lodge was so still, that the song just dwindled away. Their leader's eyes were flashing. "Don't you know?" he asked in a whisper. It was the loudest whisper they had ever heard, and it echoed through the hall. "No, no, no, no. Don't you know that the kingdom is not noise, but power? Power, 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 power." This echo surged even louder through the hall. Ranger Commander planted his feet firmly apart on the platform. He raised his arms in a great sweep. "Like this!" shouted Ranger Commander. A wind began to blow. "Woo, woo, whoosh!" The knights held on to each other to keep from being blown away. "And like this!" spoke Ranger Commander again. Light filled his body and shone as a bright torch through the dark building. "And like this!" Crack! Lightning flashed. Thunder rolled. Moments later, rain came. The wind lifted the lodge from its foundations. Round and round and round it spun up into the sky. The two knights tumbled from wall to wall, but the man on the platform stood still, glowing in the light, his arms raised, his feet firm, and his eyes flashing stars. Finally the wind settled the lodge on the earth. The rain stopped. The lightning was gone. The thunder ceased. All was quiet, and the hall became completely dark again. Out of the quiet came Ranger Commander's voice. "From henceforward take no name unto yourselves that you do not deserve. You are not rangers. You do not defend the kingdom or protect the outcasts or fight the enemy. Do not mistake other people's deeds for your own. Do not mistake words for daring. You may find your own place in the kingdom, but do not pretend to take another's." All was quiet again. The only sound was the Ranger Commander's footsteps as he briskly walked out of the hall. The two knights stood for a long time in the stillness. It was the first time they had ever known the power of silence. Bumpkin and Pumpkin never again said they were rangers, or even thought of it themselves. They never went on patrols or stood beneath the watchtower shouting the ranger cry. Instead, they decided to live near Stonegate entrance and conduct welcome tours for newcomers to Great Park. They gave free rides on their steeds and made small children laugh and told stories of the brave deeds of rangers, and they were content with their own place in the kingdom. And so the two knights never again mistook themselves, for when one has seen and heard and known the real thing, one never again confuses noise with power.